the cross-connection control bylaw was an important piece of municipal legislation. It was something that the Department of Environment essentially requires Oxford to have on the books in order to be certified to operate their water service, their potable water service to the community. And it will require the town now to do ongoing inspections and potentially give them the opportunity for enforcement, levying fines and having certain adjustments done. But it primarily is going to affect large, like apartment building complexes or commercial operations more than the average water user.
But let me stop you there. It seems to me that this is nothing new. It's not new science or anything. It seems to me that this has been a standard procedure in all municipal water systems as far back as I can remember. How did Oxford operate all this time without having it?
Well, that's a good question. We have the historical memory of institutions tends to be challenging in terms of its continuance through a body like a municipal government over time, as you have councils that change position and CAOs and town clerks that change position. But just to be clear, we're not talking about the backflow valve that most residences should have installed to keep water from flowing back into the system from the house. This is more of a commercial situation regarding larger connections to the system, where somebody may have a large in institution or in building cistern or some sort of thing that would have water stored that could possibly contaminate the rest of the water system. It's not going to affect many people at this point.
There you go. All right. Now you said that was not the highlight. Therefore, what was?
Well, I do want to give a shout out to the latest municipal employee, and that would be Oxford's new MPAL, the Municipal Physical Activity Leader. It's a position that has been kind of vacant over the last couple of years. They had a problem with one of the municipal members who was in that position had to leave it for a certain amount of time and apparently won't be back anytime soon. So they've had temporary workers brought in, but now we have apparently a new official, MPAL, and that is Marion Abbott. And not only is she a new MPAL, she's a new Oxford resident. She and her husband came to town last summer. So very quickly, the pair of them have landed in town and they've inserted themselves into the local cultural scene. They attend the council meetings. They are very much becoming very contributing local citizens. And I should mention her husband, Giancarlo. You'll see him quite often filling in whenever our regular crossing guard isn't available. So give him a wave when you come through town anytime around school hours.
Now, does Ms. Abbott, does she come to council and do exercises in front of the councillors while they're talking and so on? Do the jumping jacks and your push-ups?
There's an idea. Get the blood pumping before the meetings. Wouldn't it be something?
Yeah.
Well, no. She's basically taking over. It's a long and convoluted story that we can't get into today. But simply put, during the pandemic, the role of Oxford's recreation director was, basically unused, unneeded, and our rec director at the time sought better fortunes in another community somewhere else. And with the pandemic going, there were no public activities to manage. Getting back, recovering post-pandemic years, the province provided support to municipalities to fund a physical activity leader at the municipal level. And it's all about getting people out and being active as opposed to doing what a regular rec director does. There's certainly some overlap, and please don't ask me to explain the details at this point. But you will see Marion and the rest of the Recreation Commission in Oxford doing some programming through the summer this year.
I think really the difference is the recreation directors became more managers of programs and planners for programs, resourcing the funds and the necessary resources for delivering on those programs, where the physical activity leader is just what the name implies. It's the person who stands in front of you and says, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and one more time, that kind of thing. And got the arms waving and just one of those people that's so infectious infectious with their joy and their attitude that you can't help but start to move with them.
Well, let me say that Marion definitely is that. I've been quite impressed with the energy she's brought to various other activities in the community in the few short months that she and her husband have been here. I'm looking forward to seeing them and what they bring to the community over the coming years.
Was there anything else at council?
Oh, the usual things that have to be covered, upgrading the snow and ice management policy to ensure accessibility. It's an ongoing struggle to make sure that everybody is being given the opportunity, even during a snowstorm or immediately after a snowstorm, to move around freely in the community without any barriers to access. That's something that came out of Oxford's Walk and Wheelability study that was finalized last year. The report is on the town's website. Also, one interesting thing, local businesses, you would be surprised to know that Oxford does have a bit of a parking problem downtown. So the town of Oxford had asked local business employees or owners to not occupy the parking spaces closest to their businesses. That sort of does make sense when you want your customers to have easy access to your store. So there are designated parking lots in town, the one by the gazebo on Main Street, and just across Main Street on Lower Main where the Black River Park is, the parking lot adjacent to the food bank and the little skate park. But there was some pushback from people in the business community because they were concerned about the security of their vehicles. So last night, council decided that they would go ahead and purchase a new security camera system to tie in with the one they currently have at the town hall, and they'll now be keeping an eye on vehicles parked at the Black River parking lot.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew that was coming, but I hadn't realized the fullness of why. And it makes sense if you're asking people to park further away from where they can keep an eye on their car. They want to make sure it's safe, and there's logic to that, certainly. Was there any discussion about a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs regarding the renewed interest, if you will, to invoke conversation about gas and fracking and all that kind of stuff?
No discussion about that last night. There was nothing under the correspondence section. I believe I remember seeing a letter from the COW meeting, but nothing was talked about that in terms of last night's meeting.
The reason I ask is it came up in yesterday's meeting of Cumberland County Council, and talked with the mayor of Cumberland here moments ago, and he was saying how pretty clear that his council and even his personal view is not inclined to want to support the effort or support the initiative by the province, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs was asking for all the councils across the province to kind of write a letter of support. And without telling us exactly what the letter would contain, it's pretty obvious that at least the one coming from Cumberland is going to say, sorry, but we can't support you. It might even be more forceful than that. But it begs the question, we talked to Tory Rushton on Wednesday about the whole question of fracking and so on, and how we all thought that was put to bed once and for all. And to find it back on the discussion table once again is a little bit disconcerting. And certainly the mayor of Cumberland felt that, and that's why I asked the question whether or not it might have been discussed at Oxford Council.
Perhaps it's not seen as something that the town of Oxford may need, and I have no inside information on this, but given that it's unlikely that any fracking will be done within the town limits, it may not be something that I think they need to worry about. I know we're running short on time, and I do want to make sure we have a couple of quick things covered. One is there is some concern, and it has been for a long time in Oxford, with it's the same problem in every community, and that is speeding. So the Police Advisory Board Committee had a discussion recently and have recommended to town council that in the upcoming budget deliberations, and we're getting close to budget time, that council consider the purchase of a couple of digital speed signs for the town, mainly to cover the area of Lower Main Street and also Little River Road, where we do have a fair amount of high-speed traffic. And these will be mobile signs. So once they are set up in one spot, if something comes up and we have problems with traffic and speeding in another section of town, they can be moved. This is something the town's been looking at for quite some time, had attempted to find funding for last year, but hopefully they'll be able to get it through the budget this year and maybe find funding to cover the cost later in this year.
They have a price tag on it?
About $10,000 for the two signs.
Now, I was going to say that I thought it was pretty expensive because the town of Amherst has also put that in their budget wish list, the police department asking for it, but I got the impression in Amherst it was about $20,000 for one. So obviously there's probably good, better, and best products out there. But
there are very many models with different features. Some of them simply say slow down if you're above the limit, and others will display your speed, and there's some concern that those that display the speed will encourage people to hit a high mark. So, you never know what is the right way to go with these things, but they are looking at some sort of signage.
Well, you talk about yahoos doing the speeding, and yahoos like the entertainment, so you're right, there may be a negative impact of that. When you post the speed right in front of them, they hit the gas and then hit the brake kind of thing. Who knows?
There's one thing we've learned about municipal governments. If you make one decision, somebody will find fault with it. So you do what you can.
There you go. You had one other item you said.
Well, the only other thing, and I apologize, I missed the chat with Rod Gilroy, the mayor of Cumberland County, this morning due to another commitment I had. But I'm sure it came up in your discussions, the ongoing concern and hand-wringing and preoccupation with what's happening in Collingwood with the fire department up there, dominating social media discussions, many people upset, and I don't know how that community is going to recover from this with their fire service. At least they will still have a fire department. Now we see if the firefighters themselves are able to regroup and find a new chief, a new leadership, somebody that can move them through this very difficult period.
Well, you're right. We did have that conversation. Took a little different perspective on it because there are some who believe the county has no jurisdiction over the individual fire departments in the county. But, of course, they have bylaws have been passed recently, in a recent year, where they do, in fact. I mean, when you're expecting the county to have the taxpayers ante up for million-dollar fire trucks and fire halls and so on, they have to have some responsibility in it. But it's a real thorny mess because each and every one of the 16 fire departments were set up many, many years ago as independent societies, and that they each have their own registration with the Registry of Joint Stock Companies. They each have their own bylaws. And then the county comes along and says, if we're going to pay some of the big bills here, we need to have some say and set some consistency and some measure of understanding from one community to the next. So it's a, pardon the expression, but it's kind of a dog's breakfast right now that has been forced into the limelight suddenly, with, of course, the very unfortunate situation that happened last Friday. Now, I said to the mayor, this will be a test of the strength of our community and a test of our compassion at the same time. So you're right, this is a tough one. And, was it a subject of conversation at council?
It was not, and I wouldn't have expected it to be. But it is definitely weighing on the minds of the people in the community of Oxford. We have very close ties, and Collingwood's just a neighbor, a very close neighbor to us. And, as always, Bill, you know it as well as I do, these days liability is what drives a lot of the decision-making. And given the situation in Collingwood, they've successfully moved with council's actions to continuing to have fire service, and I think that's the most important thing for the moment for that community.
Indeed, and this is a tough one to be sure. We're pussyfooting around a little bit here in our conversation because it's a very delicate situation. And as you say, liability concerns. Now, you know me, I'm not one who wants to have insurance companies or lawyers setting policy for how I conduct my life. And, I'll take some risk perhaps, but that's my responsibility and that's my prerogative. But when it comes to something like a fire department, covering a community with public services paid for largely by taxpayers' money, everybody gets in on this food chain, so to speak, and becomes partly responsible, partly reliable. And when there's a crisis like we have before us, the potential for legal action and claims is just muddies the waters completely.
Indeed. We'll keep an eye on it.
You will indeed, and I look forward to that. Sorry we didn't have time to talk about Hello Oxford, but I know you're there. I know you're alive and well and cooking the books. No, you're not. No, you're not. We'll get a chance to talk about that next time, or maybe, if you'd like, we can set aside a time exclusively to talk about new media in small communities. How's that?
Let me check my calendar.